In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be discussing the win against Milan in the Derby della Madonnina, previewing the Champions League tie against Barcelona at the Camp Nou, as well as the Serie A away game against Lazio, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on sempreinter.com.
Ecco Perisic, 1 contro 1, gioco di gambe, guadagna il fondo, il cross, Icardi, e gol, 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 Maurito il Mamba!
Sono i blocchi nell'area di rigore, arriva la palla, la prende Vecino! La prende Vecino! Che segna solo contro le romane, segna il gol del 3-2!
Per una vittoria eccezionale, eccezionale!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Ruzzari, who woke up today with a big grin on my face, and I'm thinking most Interisti did as well. But before we get into all of that, let me welcome the panel, and we're joined by the founder of the Gentleman Ultra, Mr. Richard Hall. Welcome back.
Hi guys, wonderful Monday, yeah?
Gorgeous Mondays. And we're also joined by sempreinter.com's own preview analyst, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Hey everyone, how's everyone? All good?
It's fantastic. And we are also joined by by Mr. Will Beckman, who does play-by-play for Serpents of Madonnina and is a staff writer at Sempreinter. Welcome back.
It's Happy Monday, surely. We're going with an adjective.
Yes, we certainly are. And the reason why we're so happy, in part, is also.
Sorry, I didn't say hello. I'm actually, yeah.
That's fine.
Hello.
Hello, Will.
I'd just come in with a really bad 80s rock reference this week.
Yeah. And we're partly really happy because we're also joined by our good friend who was at the Stadio Giuseppe Meazza yesterday to watch Inter win. Welcome back to the Studio Inter, Mr. James Horncastle.
A pleasure to be back.
Always nice to have you. And you were saying that you're still in Italy and you're watching Rai, and it was a rather interesting show starting just as we're recording, wasn't it?
Yes, this is the program that is the kind of like Panorama in the UK, or I don't know, some kind of investigative journalism show wherever you may be listening, and it's about the ticketing fiasco at Juventus and the 'Ndrangheta and the Calabrian mafia getting involved in that, and just how much people knew about that within the club. It seems to be causing quite a stir in Italy. This because they've teased a lot of the stuff out of it. With for example, the reporter going to see Beppe Marotta. Sort of wiretaps between the kind of security manager and Leonardo Bonucci and Francesco Calvo, the former commercial director at the club. So, yeah, very interesting to see what comes out of this documentary.
Well, whenever there's dirt involved in Juventus, I'm sure Inter fans are interested. So be sure to check that out on YouTube or wherever you see these documentaries online. I personally just watched I think Rai made a fantastic remake, like a video remake documentary of the Calciopoli investigations, where some guy was acting as Moggi crying, and it was really bad acting, but it was good. The actual documentary was good. No, but it was a dramatization, exactly, and it was really, really overdrawn, like the acting is over the top.
O.J. Simpson.
Exactly.
We are the Calciopoli Reenactment Society.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it was really. I mean, what was really interesting was the fact that it was all factual, because everything was backed up with actual, evidence. But the acting was just, oh my god, it was cringeworthy. It was like watching one of those, when someone who can't sing to save their life applies for Pop Idol or something. It was really cringy. Right, let's not dwell on that. Let's move on to something that has absolutely nothing to do with Juventus, namely the Derby della Madonnina, which you attended yesterday at the San Siro, James. And I'm keen to hear your thoughts, because although I'm really happy that Inter won, I think this is now the third derby under Gennaro Gattuso, where I think where I think that Milan have gone into this derby from the start with the intention to park the bus, win the ball high up, and counterattack against Inter in a way that only provincial teams do when they come to the San Siro. And I'm quite annoyed with this. My question to you is, first of all, do you agree with that assessment? And do you think there's a danger, if you do agree, do you think there's a danger moving on that he might be changing if this were to continue and Gattuso were to stay on quite some time at Milan, that if he continues like this might change the entire dynamic surrounding the derby?
I mean, I found his press conference on the eve of the game quite curious because both managers were asked, look, if you could have any Milan player, who would you take? Luciano Spalletti. And Gattuso was asked if he could take any Inter player, who would he take? And he kind of said, well, all of them. They're all really strong players, which on the one hand was quite a diplomatic answer, but on the other, I thought kind of sent the wrong message. It's like you're basically saying this team's better than us. And in terms of his tactical setup, as you say, he went with the same kind of approach that he had in the Coppa Italia in December, and the game again in March, April time. And you look at how Milan have evolved under Gattuso over the last almost year. They're no longer that team that kind of needs to park the bus, that needs to kind of battle and suffer, and because that's just not their characteristics anymore. This is a team that has shown itself, particularly since the start of the season, able to play good football, be bold and courageous, play out from the back, pass their way from one end of the pitch to the other. And what struck me again throughout yesterday's game was how they were unable to get Suso involved. Higuain only had one touch in the penalty area in the first half, and that was in first half stoppage time. I think Milan as a whole only had 4 touches in the entire game in Inter's penalty area, and they were just very ineffective, I thought. And when Bonaventura and Frank Kessie sort of broke forward on the counter-attack and were trying to run into space, I think the problem was they then made the wrong decision. Who to pass to. I remember I was sat next to a quote unquote journalist who was clearly a Milan fan, who the number of times he punched the desk. There was one case where there was a switch that was on and it was an under-hit pass. There was another chance where they had a man free on the flank, and they tried to pass it through, and all Bonaventura had to do was kind of be aware enough to basically run over the ball and allow it to go to his teammate, and he got in the way, and the move broke down. And that seemed to be, pretty much the theme of the game for them. Handanovic, aside from the goal which was disallowed at the end of the first half when Musacchio was offside, he had nothing to do. I think, for me, as you said, Nima, it was quite a provincial approach from Gattuso. But given what we've seen from them, given that they'd gone into this game with 3 straight wins, Higuain had scored in 6 straight games, they'd scored 10 goals in their last however many games, and we're finding the goal really easy. Suso, at the top of the assist charts in Europe's top 5 leagues, and they had nothing, both for approach, and I think to some extent you have to give into credit for neutralising what Milan were doing, but I don't think Milan. Certainly, I think Milan helped Inter. So I'm a bit surprised this is your starting question, that you're criticising Gattuso for basically helping your team win.
No, but the thing is,
he's just bitter because he predicted a defeat on last week's pod. So
really, no. But to be honest, this is because I was thinking about this. I'm really, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because personally, I mean, growing up, this derby, what makes this derby so special is that it's not just the fact that it's 2 clubs who are world class. It's not just about the fact that there are two clubs that have conquered the world and look at themselves as world beaters and galactic superstars and have this kind of huge picture image of themselves. It's the fact that no matter how poorly things have been going in the league, no matter how poor a form either of these teams have had, in my lifetime, going into the derby, this has always been a derby where both teams have always gone out there to win. And it's one thing if you have one derby where you have lots of injuries, or if this is a cup game, that's fine. But what annoys me about Gattuso's approach at Milan in the third derby in a row now is the fact that he's not even trying. The Derby della Madonnina is spettacoli. It's supposed to be, it's two teams, two world-class teams going at it back and forth and trying to win. Yesterday there was only one big club on that pitch, and that was Inter, and the other team was a team that played the way Cagliari, Sassuolo, and Parma do when they come to the San Siro, and that's not what I'm worried, because this is a trend now under Gattuso. One game, nothing. Two. This is the third game in a row under Gattuso, and I'm worried that this could change the entire approach and the dynamics surrounding the derby, because it goes from being that spettacolo, this spectacular event, to being just another boring city derby where that's decided on individual mistakes.
I mean, I thought another thing that stood out for me yesterday was that. When Milan were counter-attacking, or when they were sort of on the one or two occasions where they were building attacks, one of the kind of trademarks of their play throughout this season, respective of whether they're part of the boss or they've tried to be a bit more open, is they've got Suso and Çalhanoğlu who just shoot from outside the box all the time. And Çalhanoğlu was really poor, I thought. Yesterday was rightly hooked. I thought Gattuso then did make quite a bold change by going with two strikers and playing 4-4-2, brought on Cutrone. But Çalhanoğlu was really disappointing. He had maybe 3 or 4 shots, including he bothered taking a free kick from 35 yards, which I know he made his name for Hamburg, scoring a free kick from essentially the halfway line against Dortmund. But he looks like a player who, second half of last season really seemed to sort of promise quite a lot. And so far this season hasn't really done all that much, aside from in the game against Olympiacos. So that is another thing where I think if you're not set up to create a lot of chances and play on the front foot, you're relying on Suso and Çalhanoğlu's aim to be sure. And I think, Suso just couldn't get in the game yesterday because of that approach, I think. And the one time he did get space on the time space on the ball was for the cross that he put in from Musacchio, who ended up being offside. He then had their first shot on target, which was kind of midway through the second half. But aside from that, they offered little. And that was the other thing all the pre-match build-up was about how physical Inter are and how much stronger they are and how much tougher they are than this super technical, skillful Milan side. And yet we saw Milan in some aspects of this game sort of resemble their manager as he was as a player, in terms of how they were throwing themselves into tackles. From the stands, I thought Biglia was more at fault than Nainggolan for that crunching tackle in the middle of the park. I've since seen replays and I've changed my opinion on that. But Biglia seemed to be really kind of out there to not only to step on Nainggolan's toes, but just to stop him. And they were very physical. And I think they just seemed to move away from everything that was good about them this season. So, as you say, playing possession-based, passing football, and maybe being a bit lightweight, a bit agile, rather than what we saw on Sunday, which was a passive team that looked to play on the counter-attack and looked to play kind of rough and ready when, I'd say, the only player in their team who's capable of doing that is someone like Kessie or someone,
I hear you. Mo, do you have a question for James? I guess not. I guess not. Will, have you got a question for James? Hello?
I'll happily go.
Okay. I need to edit all this out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Okay.
Just ask me and I'll go if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. Richard, do you want to ask James something?
Yeah, it's actually on that point you made about the physicality of the game, and also the fact that Milan didn't play for most of the game particularly well, or with as much fight as many expected them to. I think my point is just, I thought that obviously Inter, as you alluded to before, pressed really well early in the game, and it was Radja Nyanglan for me who was just phenomenal in the small amount of time he was on the pitch. And I felt if the game had carried on like that, it could have been more convincing for Inter, because I think it would have dominated perhaps more possession. So my question is kind of twofold in one way. That when I just want to know if you think that element when Nyanglan went off the pitch and Valero came on, I mean, even though he tried so hard to affect the game and to an extent was okay, do you think that made a huge difference? Because I was surprised at the drop-off personally. And secondly, I just, on a side note, obviously Milan were heavily criticised, especially by the cover third afterwards. There's been quite a bit about a statement from one of the ultras about the lack of fight, about the lack of, how the ability even. And like Nima said before, this is a derby and they've not really gone out and done that. I just wondered if there's been any more fallout from that in Italy in the last couple of hours.
Well, I haven't seen any, partly because I've been sort of busy with some other bits and bobs. But what I would say, the Milan fans last night were incredible. They were bouncing up and down all the way throughout the game. When the performance of the team was disappointing, and you could be completely forgiven for thinking that their team was winning, given how they were essentially partying and created a real kind of South American, Argentinian style atmosphere about the place. So I can understand their disappointment. I think one of the things that again caught my eye when Nyanglan went off, I kind of had a deep intake of breath and thought this could be a major momentum changer for this derby. And instead, it wasn't as much as a momentum changer as I expected it to be, because although there was the drop-off that you talk about with Borja coming on, I thought Milan could take more advantage of that, and they didn't. And I think, again, that is something that for Milan fans, be pretty galling when the guy who basically has come in, who's there to set the tone when it comes to intensity, and also has been getting Spalletti teams goals from midfield for years. When he goes off, sort of 26 minutes into his first derby, I thought that was the wake up call, the chance that Milan would have to actually think, okay, now this is in our favour, and instead it was Inter who kept creating chances, with De Vrij hitting the post, Politano running into the box and dribbling and causing a bit of a panic. Donnarumma, even before the kind of the most decisive moment of the game in the 92nd minute, there was a cross from Asamoah in the first half where he came out far too far from his goal, and didn't really punch it away convincingly. Where you just thought that, I think, sent jitters through the Curva Sud and the Milan fans. And so any kind of momentum that they might be swung back in their favour from Nyanglan going off just wasn't there. And that's why I just thought overall Inter completely deserved the win.
Great. Mo, did you have a question for James?
Yeah, so James, where do we always talk about this being 3 points, just 3 points, etc. But what do Inter take away from this match yesterday for the coming run, in your opinion? It's a tough run, important games against the group favorites in the Champions League, away to Lazio, etc. What do you think realistically we can take away from the result yesterday?
I think it was important that they kept this run going. 7 straight wins now, and I think it's to some extent the only blemish on it is the injury to Nyanglan and the doubts over the fitness of Brozovic and Perisic going into the Barcelona game. Because I remember on Sunday morning, when the kind of news sort of came through that Messi was going to be out for a month, 6 weeks, I thought, wow, Inter have got themselves in such a great position. They've kind of earned their own luck here into going to this kind of double header against Barcelona, and Barcelona are not going to have Messi there. This is just fantastic. I still think Inter can get something in this doubleheader, be it at Camp Nou or at San Siro. And I think if they do get something from any of those games, qualification is very close indeed. Because you look at the other two teams, they've both got 0 points, if I'm not mistaken. So for Inter to already have that cushion is great. And I think as Spalletti alluded to, aside from the points, this is so important for the mentality of the team, because it's clearly, as we've discussed before, this team has very violent mood swings. One loss can precipitate a crisis which takes months to get out of. So I think for them to again keep the streak going, but also to win late again, as they keep doing, shows that this team stays in games, always believes, and I think that's a massive pro for Inter going forward. And we shouldn't forget that last year Inter distinguished themselves in the big games, by either going undefeated in them or doing better than many people expected. Aside, even in the game they lost, the Derby d'Italia, in the end of April last year,
down
10 men and were leading going into the final sort of 10 minutes of that game. Inter really shone for me in those matches, and I think that reflects the kind of the image of the captain, really, Icardi, who almost always raises his game on the big occasions. So I think those are all positives. I think the general solidity of the team, even though they're not playing fantastic, flamboyant football, the solidity of the team is pretty impressive. And the fact that they can essentially keep Miranda on the bench, or drop Miranda and play Divrai and Skriniar. I mean, when you see them up close and personal, you really realise just how big, towering figures these guys that they have at the back. So, I think it's Inter have got themselves in a very good position.
I agree. They really do. Right. Will, did you have a question for James?
Yeah, I did have a couple, although I think you sort of answered the first one. It was going to be about De Vrij, because I think he has been even better than I expected, which is quite something. I would say that to sort of counter the optimism that, for how well Inter played, if Higuain had been on the pitch, then it would have been a very difficult game for us. No, that's a joke, obviously. Because De Vrij was incredible. No, my question is, what's a good season for Inter now? Because I still don't think the Scudetto is realistic, but it feels like if you say they just need to get in the top 4 again, when they win 7 in a row, that's not really enough.
Yeah,
there's kind of a limbo here, because 6 points off Juventus, but 5 points ahead of 5th place. Milan and Roma have got so many problems at the moment. The Champions League, do we have to get out the... What? I don't know. What is sort of 3rd and last 16? Is that about par? How do we judge this team, whether they've had a good season in May?
how I would justify 3rd representing its success for Inter would be that they'd finally kind of break that Roma and Napoli duopoly of being, hey, we are the contenders to Juventus's crown sort of every year. And that's been the case, more or less since 2012. So I think that, in some respects, would be a positive. I think there's no reason why, looking at the talent that Inter have got and the kind of depth that they now have, why you couldn't maybe see them doing what Roma did last year in the Champions League. Because if Roma can get to the semi-finals of the Champions League, then after coming through a group that is, I think, an equivalent in difficulty. So Roma had, for example, Chelsea, Atletico Madrid, and Qarabag last year. Inter's is more difficult with Barca, Spurs, and PSV. I think if they were to come out of that group, if they were to even top that group unexpectedly, the confidence that they might draw from that, the prospects of them maybe getting a more favourable draw in the round of 16. Once you get into the quarterfinals, anything can happen. So I think that is something that Inter will be thinking game by game about. That's not going to be an objective. But I do think all the clubs that are not Juventus need to look at the Coppa Italia and think, can we win that? Can we get a trophy? Because the fact that they've been able to do the double for the last 4 years isn't a disgrace, because you look at how good Juventus are, and yeah, that completely makes sense. But it's, I think, a trophy for any of these teams in this particular period where, you know, Juventus essentially just looking to do the treble, which of course you guys do not want to happen. To stop them in some way like that, I think would represent a positive. So yeah, I would say third, decent Champions League run. If you can win the cup, that's success. But I mean, that's a lot of things. I would take one of those. Yeah, I would look at third and say, yeah, they're still pointing in the right direction. But I think, as I said, I think they've got the material there, la stoffa, to sort of to do something in a cup. And because, I mean, just being in the stadium last night, and I unfortunately wasn't there for the Spurs game, but San Siro really does add value to a team. It gives you something extra, which I think few other clubs, few other teams around the continent can call upon. And I think if you can get yourself in a position where you have that backing and support behind you, there's no telling what Inter can do. So it'd be great if they can get through this group and get a favourable draw in the round 16 and then see what happens.
For me, the way I look at it, I mean, is I think that for Inter, it's about improvement on every year. If they finish third, if they go to the semi-final or the final of the Coppa Italia, and if they go qualify from the group, that, in my opinion, is success. Because Spalletti is not he's not one of those coaches who comes in and wins and is there to win at that moment. He's always been, in my opinion, at least, someone who builds a couple of seasons and then peaks in his third, fourth, fifth season maybe. He's not like a Simeone or even Mourinho, who just, you know, he comes in and he wins, starting then. That's when he wins. So for me, I think a good season would be just to improve and build on the previous season, and I think Inter are en route to doing that. So that should be enough to be success. Now, obviously, Inter should always win and aim, as you know, if we're talking generally, Inter should always have as an aim to win titles. But if you look at where Inter are coming from and where Juve are, I mean, you have to be realistic. And I think if they can win a Coppa Italia title, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation at the start of the season, judging by how people graded their transfer window, was that Inter could and should maybe be runners-up this year. Now, you know, the start of the season, August to the first international break, I think was a bit of a reality check and changed people's opinions of that. And Napoli have certainly done a lot better than I was expecting under Ancelotti. I thought they would regress. That take nothing away from his ability as a manager. I just thought Sarri had overachieved to such an extent with that team that there was going to be some inevitable drop-off. And instead, they've come through a really hard start to the season with, 7 wins out of 9. And now it's kind of downhill for them through into Christmas. So ordinarily, I think now that there is I want to see that be a competition between Napoli and Inter for second spot, really.
Yeah, and that's what I heard a Napoli fan say at the start of the season. Said, I think it'll be a battle between Napoli and Inter for second. So I'd take that.
Also, you did a pretty interesting interview with Suso when you were down there, and he said that he said that Inter wanted him, but he turned them down. If I read it correctly, which I found
well, you better do, because you better had, otherwise he'd be crucifying me, because the thing that he made very clear before the interview, and then before telling us this, because I was there with a couple of other journalists, and he was like, people always misconstrue my words. I'll say something and it comes out completely differently in the press. Like, for example, stuff I said about Montella. So write what I say, guys. And yeah, before this, he did say, write it exactly as I say it. And what he said was that in the summer, Inter, I think, sensing some vulnerability, AC Milan, because of their financial situation. What a statement that was that Milan put out today, sacking Marco Bassone, by the way. That's another thing. But Inter tried to sign him. Massimiliano Mirabelli, the now former sporting director of Milan, sat down with Sousa and his agent, and this is something that Sousa really wanted to point out and was kind of seen as a criticism of Mirabelli, because Mirabelli then came out publicly and said he didn't know anything about this reported offer from Inter. And when you sit down and talk about it with a player, there is an inference, there is a kind of implication, an inference there that that the clubs may be considering accepting it or is thinking about it. And Sousa, I think you could look at it the other way, in that an agent's bringing that offer to the table and saying, look, Inter they're going to pay you this, you should take it. But Sousa was very kind of clear in saying, I really wanted to stay here. That was my objective from day one. And he said that Inter had also bid for him the summer before as well, when he was in negotiations for the contract that he signed that September of 2017. So, look, I mean, given how Inter play with width, with wingers, with guys who love crossing into the box, yeah, of course. I mean, Sousa fits into that very well. But yeah, I mean, it was very interesting how he'd been very jovial and funny up until that point, talking about how he loves thrashing Lucas Billy on PlayStation, and then got very serious when it came to sort of making this point.
I remember that so well, because I remember Mirabelli saying something along the lines that Suso to Inter is only fantasy football, and if Inter wants Suso, they'll have to pay us 100 million plus Mauro Icardi and Ivan Perisic. I remember that, so I can understand why he's a bit annoyed about that, because the way Mirabelli handled that was very like, oh, this is all nonsense. There's no talk. This is all just talk and blah blah blah. So I can understand why he might feel the need to set the record straight there. And especially with a director who's no longer there, and the new directorship at Milan now, I think there's some classic politics involved there as well, because you have to remember that Leonardo and Maldini were amongst the people that they wanted to bring in the Fassone Mirabelli crowd, and they turned them down. So I think there's a little bit of politics on the behalf of the little Suso there as well.
You also look at the big signings that they made last summer, that Fassone and Mirabelli made.
Yeah.
Kalinic, Andre Silva, and Leonardo Bonucci. And what was the first thing that Leonardo and Maldini did?
So Bonucci.
They sold all three.
Indeed. Well, great. It was great having you on. We'll always love having you on, James. Have you got anything else we should be looking out for now? Aside from will there be anything else we'll be able to hear you talk about? Because now I've heard you talk about Maldini. I've heard you talk about the Derby della Madonnina on this, the what's it called? The people who produce the Serie A in English. In Front, is it?
Oh yeah, okay, yes, yeah. I've done these pieced cameras about various legends of the game, which then get beamed around the world in markets that aren't in the UK or in Italy. So I never get to see them, but I get people on Twitter saying, "I saw you, talking about Del Piero or Maldini." So yeah, that's been quite interesting. But yeah, no, I spent the last 2 weeks ago. I was in Emilia Romagna, and because Serie A's got maybe 4 or 5 clubs in Emilia Romagna at the moment, So I went around a few of them. So I went to Sassuolo, which was really interesting. So I've written a sort of piece which is going to come out about that, because I spoke to Kevin Prince Boateng about De Zerbi and his walk off. And then I also went to Ferrara to go to Spal and spoke to Lazzari, which was really interesting, going to Spal and their training ground, which has been the same training ground since Paolo Mazza was alive. That was great. So I've got those two bits coming out. So I think the Boateng stuff might drop this week, even though it's a very kind of the Johnny Intensi, as the with Man United.
Did you ask him anything about? Did you ask him anything about his Michael Jackson dancing?
And I can tell you, because this might not actually make it into the piece, that I said, would he ever do that again? And he said, no, it was a one-off thing, and it wouldn't be cool to do it again. He didn't want it to become like a party trick. He wanted it to be spontaneous. For Milan's Scudetto winning party, he just went, he wasn't planning to do that. I mean, it looked planned, didn't it? And apparently the marketing department just came up to him whilst he was sat in the dressing room, gave him the outfit, gave him the glove, and said, "There you go, we've got you this Michael Jackson outfit." So I asked him if he still had like the sequin glove and everything. Like, no, I had to give it back because essentially it was like rented out fancy dress.
Oh, that's simply brilliant. That's brilliant. Right. Well, as always, it's a pleasure having you. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, what's your handle?
It's very simple. It's at James Horncastle.
Well, it's always a pleasure, James. Thanks so much. Hope to have you come on real soon again.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, James. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Cheers.
Right. I thought let's briefly touch on the derby a little thing. I'm keen to hear what you guys think. Starting with you, Mo. I mean, did the game plan out the way you expected it to?
Well, I mean, look, I predicted a 3-1 win. I thought it was going to be a sweeping win for Inter. I think it was a sweeping win for Inter in almost every respect except for the result. And the result, it could have easily been a 3-1 or a 3-0 or whatever. A convincing multi-goal difference score had Skriniar's ball in the first half just inched underneath the crossbar. Had Vecino, managed not to hoof the ball up into the stands, or Politano been able to put away his two good chances, or Icardi to connect with that. I think it was Politano, it was the Versalico early cross in towards the end of the first half. So I mean, we definitely had our chances. The game was locked. We didn't have as many chances as we would have had we scored earlier. So I think had any of the first half goals gone in, the scoreline would have been more in Inter's favor, because they had very little to offer going forward. So I mean, there's a lot of I see a lot of still a bit of negativity about the style of play, etc. Yesterday, we're a combative side. We don't play free flowing football. I think that's all. It's all useless talk. It's not like we're winning. We're deserved winners in almost all the matches. The fact that we score the goals in the last 10, 5, 10, 3, 2 minutes of each of important matches doesn't mean that we don't deserve the victories, with the exception of maybe the Spal game. But in almost all other games, we've earned the result, and we've earned it comprehensively. So the fact that the goal comes towards the end, I think, is a sign of character, a sign of strength, a sign of attitude, rather than it being a sign of good fortune.
Yeah, I agree with you. This good fortune nonsense. I mean, what you can turn that on its head and say that against the Torino the first 45 minutes when Inter dominated, they should. I mean, I don't care about that. At the end of the day, this season, the league table never lies unless when Juventus have bribed the refs.
Yeah.
And
and what I mean is, it's not like it's we get fortuitous goals or whatever. They're hard-earned, well-worked, well-deserved goals. That's and they come with the run of play, not against it.
Yeah, and we've heard of Fergie time, but now it's definitely Inter time. I mean, the fact that Inter's are the team in the Serie A that score most of their goals towards the end of the games is also not a coincidence. So I don't buy that nonsense. But I'm really keen to hear what you think, Richard, about this week. This week was all about, as James said, how the Italian media put this, portrayed this game as the beautiful playing, free-flowing Milan against the ugly physical side of Inter, and then we go into the derby, and it's basically Milan that parked the bus and playing like a provincial team that just are hacking at the backside of Nainggolan's calf. I mean, what was your take on that whole thing?
It's interesting because I think that the media did play it up a little bit like that, especially with Milan scoring, what was it now? Was it 6-10 goals or something along the lines in 3 games beforehand against Sassuolo, Kiev, Olympiacos. Everyone thought they were going to run riot, especially, and that build with the matadors, as Gazzetta said, Icardi versus Gonzalo Higuain, and it was quite amusing in some respects that all that build up, and I mean hardly either of the strikers got much to do at all. For me, it was interesting because I do put it down to that moment when the Anglo went off. I was quite impressed with the first sort of 15-20 minutes when Inter pressed well and didn't let Milan play. I mean, after that, you're right. Milan just completely went into a shell. But it doesn't really bother me, to be honest. I mean, at the moment, if Inter are pragmatic and winning, kind of like what Mo said there and what James alluded to before, in the sense of they've not played that cavalier-style football we've seen Spalletti invoke Roma back in the day, but it doesn't really matter. The results are the results, and for me right now, especially in the derby, I've been more annoyed against games like Mo alluded to before. Spal, I think there's a couple more which Sampdoria really frustrated me. But in the derby, especially, derbies are about moments. I wouldn't have expected, if we were playing fantastic brand of football, I would have expected us in the derby for it to drop off a little bit, to be fair. You look at the two curvers before, you look at that atmosphere, you wouldn't be surprised if a few players got some nerves. That, we often see these big games aren't always the most fantastic. But the one thing that you said before, Nima, was that even if it's somewhat of a physical game, even if it's somewhat of a frustrating, disjointed game, both teams do look like they want to win. But, you come out the back of it and 7 wins on the bounce going into the Barcelona game, which we'll talk about later. But I was pleased. I was pleased because of the dramatic. I mean, one thing I will pick you up on, though, it's not Inter time. It's surely just Vecino time at the moment. I mean, that cross can.
That was a Candreva cross. I mean, that's the kind of crosses that Candreva gets in when he's, these early crosses, and Inter were trying to get those crosses in all the time throughout the match.
That goal, like you say, that cross was incredible. The movement of Icardi, I love that thing that's going around Twitter at the moment, which just focuses on Icardi, and you just see how it doesn't matter if he had 15 touches in the whole game or whatever it was. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, he's the one. Yeah, exactly. And to have that, and he did what Higuain didn't. And, because of I hate the word desire, so I'm going to change it, because it's just any English pundit ever. We'll just use that. But Inter did have the character, as Mo pointed out before, and the fact that we are scoring goals at these late junctures is encouraging. So, as for a derby, you had the choreography, you had the atmosphere. It wasn't the best game, but come on, even when I remember, watching games back in, even with all those fantastic players. I rewatched one the other day. I think it was 94. It was 0-0. It was dull as hell. It was so poor. But it's a victory. It's in the derby now. Confidence for Barcelona.
Well, I have to contradict you a little bit there. But in '94, you had a back line of Tassotti, Costa Curta, Baresi, and Maldini. So that goal is drawn. And on the other side, you had Riccardo Ferri, but you had Riccardo Ferri. Yeah,
Oh, it's angry now.
but Paliuka. So no,
Paliuka.
I think the goalless draws back then did down the quality. This wasn't the derby where Mazzarri played against Seedorf or whatever it was. Right? No. Will, I just keen to hear your take on the derby. What's the most positive thing from an Inter perspective that you take with you from this derby?
One positive thing. Yeah, I suppose the character is fantastic. The fact that Milan think they're so inferior makes me feel quite nice. The way that they set up so defensively. If you want to find a more sort of obscure positive to take from the match, the fear that Inter inject into other teams. I think actually I would say Vecino. I was gonna get to it anyway, but we said last week that this was a game of moments, and I'm glad Rich said it again because it was. It's the flashes, the giocate, and we said that Inter had more players who could make the most of those moments. And Vecino and Icardi they play the moments, and that's what happened at the end. They don't necessarily stun you throughout the game, although I do think Vecino's performances all round have become a bit better this season. But when it comes to the key moment, there's. I remember Vecino reminds me a bit of Khedira for Juventus because Khedira can go sort of 80 minutes when he's like 5 out of 10, but then when those two key moments come on, Allegri keeps him on because he plays them better than so many other players, and that's where Daniele Adani got that comment a few weeks ago when he said, even when Vecino's tired and he's not played well, leave him on the pitch because he'll give you something when you need it, and I think if you were to pick an individual that, I don't know if he was the man of the match, but he's one of the most positive notes from this sort of this sort of run of games, because Spalletti said at the start of the season in his first press conference before the first game, I think the question was something like, who do you want more from this season? And he said, I want more from Vecino. I want more from Vecino because he was injured in the second half of last season. He's not shown us what he's capable of. And he's been repaid. He had to make a decision at the end of August. Do I put Vecino in the Champions League squad or do I put Gagliardini in the Champions League squad? And he's made the right decision. Vecino scored the winner against Spurs. He provided that incredible assist, which was no fluke yesterday. So I would say La Garra Charrua himself is the best bit of news.
He was he came in third according to the SempreInter.com readers in the man of the match. He got 13% of the vote. He had 7.5% behind Marcelo Brozovic, who was my man of the match, who finished second. And the winner with 41% of the vote was Mauro Icardi, as per the SempreInter.com readers.
Do you remember when he couldn't score in the derby, by the way? I just had to say that. Do you remember when this was his bugbear, this game? Do you remember all those derbies? It was like, yeah, but you can't do it against Milan. This is long gone.
Yeah. Now he's written history.
This sounds ridiculous now.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. And now he's written history, and instead is the first Interista in history to have scored all of Inter's 5 latest goals against Milan. It's unbelievable. Right. Speaking of history, it's now it's time for us to walk down memory lane. It's time for Inter Legends with Mr. Critty Smith.
Non è un personaggio che può essere sostituito perché era un personaggio assolutamente unico. Il fatto che abbia sempre pensato e avuto nel cuore 2 colori, il nero e l'azzurro.
First of all, Critty, welcome to Studio Inter. I trust you had a good day so far.
Yeah, it's been a busy Monday, but it's been a good Monday. The sun's out, the birds are chirping, the weather's nice. Can't complain.
And Inter won yesterday as well, but we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we
could talk about it.
We're just keen to hear a little bit who the Inter legend that you've picked this week.
The Inter legend that we picked this week, we're going to go ahead and complete the first decade of this century as far as the center forward position goes. We talked last week about Christian Vieri, and this week we're going to essentially talk about the man who filled his boots once he left Inter and went to Milan, and that is the charismatic enigma that is one Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Zlatan is kind of a polarizing figure. And he has, of course, the personality that is truly a gift from the gods, because he's both kind of a jackass in a way, but also he inserts just the ever so slightest bit of humor when he does these things, whether it's punching out a teammate in training, or whether it's threatening to break Rafael van der Vaart's legs, or or anything such like that. And you know, you and I have talked, and I said this in the article, is that, you know, if Cristiano Ronaldo did some of the things that Zlatan said, it would be pure hate. But but you know, Zlatan can get away with this because he has this personality, and it makes him almost likable, and the likable villain in doing and saying these things. But you know, he came to Inter on a 4-year deal, you know, came from one of our rivals, Juventus, and then of course later played for our other rivals, Milan, down the road after a trip to Barcelona. And he stayed for 3 years. And you have to say, well, 3 years, what does that really do? I mean, can you really become a legend of a club in 3 seasons? Well, yeah, you can. When you win 3 Scudetti, you can do that. You win a Capocannoniere, you can do that. And unfortunately for him, he left before year 2 of the Jose Mourinho experiment, which of course gave us the treble and the Champions League victory. And he missed out on that season. But what he was able to do in between 2006 and 2009 was truly amazing. You have to think, he came into a side that had a very good attacking front line. You had Adriano, you had Crespo, you had Recoba, and then he came in and immediately made his presence felt. And by the end of the 3 years that he was at Inter, he was the undisputed star number 9. 35 appearances he made that season, scored the most goals in Serie A, as we just said. And you know, he by standards of Zlatan, he was very tame during his time at Inter. Very, you know, kind of under the radar as far as any kind of controversies with his teammates, or getting into fistfights, or breaking people's legs. So we're just going to have a little discussion here real quick about the 3-year tenure of Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the San Siro.
For me, when I think of Ibra and his tenure at Inter, it's when he comes back and wins the Scudetto against Parma. When he's been injured, he's almost been injured for 6 months. Inter had 10, 12 points advantage. He goes off. Inter squander that advantage. He comes on in the second half, scores 2 goals, and then goes off the pitch that week when, because of the Italian press had been really aggressive against Inter. So Inter had a silenzio stampa after the Parma win, and he's walking off the pitch, and all of the Italian media want to talk to him, and he just says, "Voi parlate, io gioco," and walks off. You talk, I play. For me, that's just so quintessentially Ibra. But I mean, yes, if you win 3 Scudetti and you're the reason that you win 3 Scudetti in just 3 years, I think you're a legend. That in my books you are. Mo, do you have any objections?
No, I have far fewer objections to Zlatan being a. I mean, I don't have objections really to Vieri being a legend, but I have fewer objections to Zlatan simply because of the era that his arrival in Nerazzurri shirt ushered in. You know, he will be forever remembered as the guy, you know, the flag bearer of that amazing run, 6-7 year run. And also the fact that when he left with the most amazing, ridiculous transfer in the history of transfers. Like, honestly, I look back at his transfer to Barcelona, and I laugh till today. You send Zlatan to Barca, he gets benched. We get Eto'o plus 67 million euros. What is this? It was the most ridiculous transfer in the history of transfers. You know, I have nothing but fond memories about him. And you know, like, even when he went to Milan, it never really left a bitter taste. You always felt that you never owned Zlatan. Zlatan was his own, like, you know, mercurial, elusive enigma that you kind of like rented his talent for a while, and then he left and he went off to do his own thing. It wasn't like Vieri. Vieri, you know, when Vieri went to Milan, you felt betrayed. But Zlatan does what Zlatan wants.
Actually, and that's what I was actually going to ask you, Mo. I was actually, if you had not brought that up, I was going to ask you If the hate level on a scale of 1 to 10 was a 9 or a 10 for Cristian Vieri, where was it when Zlatan wore the red and black shirt? Because they both played for basically there was only 1 year in between. As Vieri went right away to Milan, but Zlatan was at Barca for 1 season. Felt the Messi effect. He's publicly gone on record saying that Messi wanted to play central, so that basically negated him and made him an outcast and kind of irrelevant. So he like Icardi sometimes feels the Messi effect. And, then he goes on to play for Milan on loan. Did you feel much differently towards him when he was playing for our arch rivals?
Yeah, no, like I said just now, I for sure did. What pissed me off more about Zlatan was him kissing the Barca badge on the day of his presentation, like only a week, was it maybe a few days after the transfer had been sealed. That kind of annoyed me. But no, by the time he'd gone to Milan, that was it. It was fine. And like I said, we never really owned Zlatan. You never owned that guy. He's above it all. He sort of transcends club colors. He's
he's
he's his own guy. He's Ibra.
He's the Ibra. He's the Ibra. Yeah.
Nima, if I could ask you, if you look at just a 3-year window, if you take any center forward that you can think of off the top of your head in a 3-year period at Inter, where do you rank Zlatan in regards to those? So this can be someone like a Klinsmann, or you can take someone obviously like Vieri, someone who's been there at least 2-3 seasons that can make an impact. Is he not the most impactful player? I mean, obviously you had Milito come in, but he didn't do what Zlatan did over 3 years. He did it for a year or two. Maybe you could argue for 3 years. Obviously the team success went down after 2010. But Zlatan, with the exception of the Champions League, in Serie A, they were dominant.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, I think in Inter's modern history, and by modern history I mean after 1960, 1970, in Inter's modern history, I don't think there will ever be a more important attacker or striker than Diego Milito. And I'm not just saying that because of the treble. It's just the way he was the symbol of an Inter that conquered everyone, and all the important goals he scored. I mean, defeating first team to defeat Juve at the Juventus Stadium, him scoring 2 goals, that he's scoring, winning the treble basically on his own. All of that stuff for me is the most important. But the best striker is Zlatan Ibrahimovic, without a doubt. And I don't mean that as a form of ability, because Ronaldo is probably the greatest talent to have played in Inter in modern times. But if you look at Ronaldo, how Ronaldo came, how Ronaldo delivered, and what Zlatan delivered, and the way he left, you can't compare the two. Ibra came, won 3 Scudetti, raised his value, became, lifted the club. Became a superstar. He was a star, but became an absolutely mega star. Left the club for, as Mo said, 65 million plus Eto'o, which financed the 4 or 5 players Mourinho needed to win the treble. So for me, he's probably. If we talk about the most important, he's number 2 after Milito for me, because Milito is, in my opinion, the most important striker he could have had. But I mean, as the Italians say, after the millennium, they consider him to be the best player to have played in the Serie A, and it's hard to disagree with that.
It's like Mo said, it does. After you look at all the clubs that he's played for, you now talk about Manchester United, you talk about PSG, you talk about Juventus, you talk about, no one really owns him. He is his own man. And it goes back to the saying that he said, there's a quote that Zlatan said, and it's not the Swedish way or the Yugoslavian way, it's the Zlatan way. And it truly is his way or the highway. I mean, and Zlatan does what Zlatan wants. And it's why I think it's so funny, like I said at the beginning, if someone like a Ronaldo does Cristiano Ronaldo does something like Zlatan has done, he gets venomous hate for this. But Zlatan can do it and people laugh. And there's something special about a player like that when it's just this humorous kind of charismatic jackass that just he kind of captures you. His personality is just all encompassing, and it's more than just a player. He's kind of, like I said, he's this charismatic enigma.
Richard, what's your favorite Ibra moment at Inter?
It's kind of touched on it in a way. I think I mentioned this before, but one of my favourite games on the Curva Nord was 2006-2007 game against Torino, last game of the season. Excuse me, 3-0 win. And I think it was the fact that when you go through that squad and the players that played that day, the likes of Figo, you can just list them off. Mike Conn scored a cracking goal that day. And it was the fact of just getting a glimpse of Ibra. And I think that says it all, really. When you look down that squad that we had and watching that title win and watching how it was one of those most incredible moments, because you were looking back at that time and thinking you thought the Ronaldos or Recobas, and even before that, as Nima, we grew up on the Klinsmans, the Brahmas, etc., and the Nicola Bertis, and just to be able to look and think, wow, this guy's achieved so much, and it was incredible. And so that 2007 season, and seeing him lift the Scudetto and being on the Covenant for that was incredible. And just any time you watched him that season, it was just, you could just tell the ability, and it was the confidence as well. Everyone else seemed so determined. Every other player, even like Figo, seemed to play with a determination, but Zlatan was the only one who really played as if it was his show. That was the great nature of that team, that there were so many amazing players that played as a team, and Mancini got them playing together. But with Zlatan, it was almost like, yeah, you guys do that and I'll do the rest. So that's my overriding memory of him.
Will, what about you? You were pretty young back then, weren't you?
I'm still pretty young, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Will's pretty young still right now.
Yeah, well, everything's relative.
Don't age me too much.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant that you weren't old enough to go to the pub by yourself back then. That's what I mean.
No, that much is true.
So, what do you remember? Like, what's your fondest memory?
Well, Parma. I mean,
yeah, Parma. Yeah.
Although I don't remember this. But I also have seen it quite a lot in the last couple of years. The Scorpion goal he scored against Bologna, that was pretty cool as well.
For me, that pass that Mark, when he makes that, when our good friend Marco Palmieri, when he's commenting against Lazio, and he does that insane Scorpion back pass to Stankovic, and everyone is just laughing, and Marco Palmieri laughs as well, because he's like, I've never seen a human being bend that way on a football pitch in that situation. He just did things that has never been done before. And I think one of my favorite memories of him it was actually a former Inter Primavera player whose name eludes me now, who hated Zlatan. And it was in this context that he said that this guy is an absolute idiot. And when the journalist asked him why do you think he's a jackass? Why do you think he's an idiot? He said, well, it was in the middle of a game in the Serie A at the San Siro. And Inter, all of a sudden, this guy turns to me and barks at me, yo, go get me a coffee. And Inter are attacking and scoring and trying to score a goal while he's standing on the touchline drinking his coffee and then joining the attack and I think scoring a goal as well, which is just so quintessentially Ibrahimovic in a way. Take a coffee break and then go score a goal. That's
absolutely.
That's hilarious.
It should be said to his credit as well. He was on that, as I believe it was Richard who just talked about that 2007 team. That was a team that scored accumulated 97 points, still the highest point total in Serie A history until Juventus recently broke that with 102. So it's still the second highest and by far the highest scoring Inter points total in the season. And that was, that's what Ibrahimovic brought to the table. He helped contribute to that 97 points.
And also, I got to say a little something that when I met Mrs. Mili Moratti, the same night we met Mr. Massimo Moratti, they actually revealed that before joining AC Milan, Ibra called President Moratti and informed him that he was going to join AC Milan, and felt that he wanted to show him that respect, to let him know about it before reading about it in the papers, as Massimo Moratti said, almost asking him of his permission, which Moratti found very respectful, and to which he had replied, according to him himself, he said that, well, I said, you can do whatever you want, but I do appreciate the gesture. So that's also something to take into consideration. I think if he could, and if Inter were in a position to sign Ibra after Mourinho, I think they would have brought him back to the club, and I would have loved to have seen it. I would have loved to.
Yeah, he claims that he grew up an Inter fan too, so it would make
no,
sense.
He did. There is a clip in Sweden when he's 17, 18 years old. I remember it so well. when Malmö is playing in the Swedish second tier, and he's been ripping that league apart. And the journalist asks him, "Where are you in 10 years' time?" And he says, "I'm up. I'm up top with Ronaldo at Inter." Scoring goals, and in a way he kind of achieved that. Not only achieved it but surpassed it, because you see everyone's seen that famous derby when Ronaldo's gone to AC Milan. He scores the first goal, Ibra assists Julio Cruz for the 1-1, and then scores the winner in that derby. There's a lot of symbolism and when it comes to Ibrahimovic and Ronaldo, both of them also being players who never won the Champions League.
And then you have the stuff like he did just a few weeks ago here in the United States. He was on a TV show and he surprised the Thailand team that was lost in the cave for such a long time, and came on the show and surprised them with an appearance, because now, of course, he plays for LA Galaxy. So I mean, there's a good-hearted. That's the thing about it. There's a good person underneath all that sarcasm and tomfoolery, if you will, trickery, punching a teammate out, whatever you want to call it. There's a really great guy in there.
Definitely. I mean, when the Swedish disabled national football team, they had no money to go to the World Cup, which they had qualified for, and they asked him for a signed national team jersey to auction out, to which he replied, "What are you going to do with the shirt?" So instead, he paid for the entire team to go there. Like that. So that's he's done loads of stuff like that. It's a very typical. Yeah, he is that way. He's a very he still remembers where he comes from, in that sense, that he's very humble. I think most of that brag thing is kind of an act. I think he's kind of joking with it. It seems to me, at least that's the way I look at it. He has self-confidence, but this, talking of himself in the third person, all that stuff, that's to me, that's kind of like a little bit of humor in the way I see it, at least.
It's a shame. I believe he's missed out just narrowly on the Champions League with Inter the year before, and of course with Barca, he was loaned out when they won it. So that's the one thing that's kind of missing off his resume, is the Champions League, and he's been close on 2 occasions as far as timelines go, but was unfortunately just not in the location at the time when the clubs won it. So Inter, like I said, 2010, and Barca the next year, but on loan in Milan. So what can you do?
He's in good company. Neither Diego Maradona and Brazilian Ronaldo won the Champions League or the European Cup, so there are worse companies to be in. He's hardly a poor player.
Buffon.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Buffon hasn't won either. That's true. That's very much true. Right. Thank you so much, Critty.
Absolutely.
You'll be back next week for another edition of Inter Legends. Until then, I hope you have a good week.
Absolutely. Same to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, let's move on. Let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football. Starting with this week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot. He's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
Yeah, so this week's Moratti, we were talking, Nima, we had to give a nod to the tifo, the curva. That was, it was amazing.
Wow.
It was, mind blowing, awesome. Lost for words to describe it. It was really fantastic. One of the best tifos I've ever seen. So we have to give a nod to that. But also, I kind of, when we were talking about which Moratti to pick, I also kind of felt like, depending on how the game would go, maybe we'd have to pick something else as well. And once again, you can't help but talk about Icardi. And Richard earlier spoke about that clip that was going around Twitter with that single camera focused on the guy alone on the run up to the goal. In the 92nd, 93rd minute, he's still got like the eyes of a hawk, the instincts of a killer, and that's those 30 seconds or so just completely embody what this guy means to Inter, what Inter means to him, what his work ethic is really like, and the sort of deadly killer that he is. So I have to give the Morati of the week not only to the Curva but also to Icardi and that amazing goal that he scored.
That video was like an Attenborough documentary.
Yes, I was going to say.
Absolutely, roaming in his natural habitat.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's hilarious. I think it is Attenborough commentating, like some genius. I don't know if we're talking about the same thing here, but I just saw it before we started recording this. Some guy has put an Attenborough commentary over that. When Icardi's running,
I haven't seen that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Absolutely brilliant, and it's like, and just when he heads the ball, he says he's the most accomplished killer. It's just brilliant. So I'll definitely check that out. Right, let's move on to a slightly more comical part of the segment. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Will Beckman.
Autogol di Ranocchia.
Yes, I'll keep this one short, but this is a man we can all laugh at. It was a man that about 11 months ago, everyone hated, and now he's someone that we can just laugh at, and that is, of course, Gianpiero Ventura, because he dived back into the world of club football this weekend. He ironically took charge of the only club in Italy that wears yellow and blue as their colours, which is very ironic for teams that he has faced in the last year or so. He was very excited about this. He took over a Chievo side who have got -1 points and have spent the entire summer doing everything within their power to cement their reputation as the most hated club in Italy after Juventus. And I think with Ventura's arrival, they have pretty much locked that spot down for the next 50 years. That there is a nice irony, isn't there, about Eeyore joining the Flying Donkeys. It was a very sort of, it was an unfortunate start, wasn't it? Because he was very excited. He said, I'm not worried. I want to put myself back into the business. I want another challenge. And Chievo lost 5-1 at home to Atalanta and are still on -1. So he has to be the Frog of the week, I'm afraid, Mr. Ventura.
Good shout.
Good shout. Right, let's move on to something slightly more negative. This week's emoji, which will be presented by Mr. Richard Hall.
Right, guys, pretty difficult to be negative when we just won the derby. So I'm going to try and keep it a little bit, not too heavy. My biggest disappointment from this week is just, and I've probably said it a few times today, is just the Radja Angolan injury. I think that coming into the Barcelona game when there's no Messi, as James alluded to earlier on, this was a massive, massive chance to be able to go and really not dominated by a long shot, but really go and stand toe-to-toe with them. And I think the injury, if it is a sprain, as they say, I'm not sure how long they've said he's going to be out for now. But if he does miss some games, I hope it doesn't damage the momentum. But it would have been just the icing on a very, very nice cake at the moment if we'd have been able to go to Barcelona with Niangolan and playing like he did in those first 20 minutes. I think he really would have put it about Barcelona a little bit, and it would have been fantastic. But it wasn't to be. I didn't particularly like the challenge. I know people are torn over that. For me, Biliga has never had any pace. So why he thought he had pace to get to that, I don't know. But yeah, that's it for me. It's a shame he's out for that game.
It's a really nice segue into what I wanted to talk about in our conclusion, and that's the Barcelona game. I wanted to ask you, Mo, what your thoughts is on this. Messi missing for Barcelona. Messi is a phenomenon, like Ronaldo. Those two are the best football players in the galaxy. There's no discussion there. So obviously, any team where Messi, when Messi's injured, he'll be missed. But in my opinion, Inter losing someone like Nainggolan and Perisic and Brozovic, in my opinion, that's a bigger blow to Inter than it is for Barcelona to lose Messi, because they have such a wide squad that they can easily adapt to not playing with Messi. Do you agree with that, Mo?
So yeah, so I think the word now is that Nainggolan is going to be out for 3 weeks. I think, as far as I know, I don't know if you guys know any different, but Perisic and Brozovic are going to be making the trip. Whether they'll be fit to start or not remains to be seen. But that's as far as I know. But of course, if we lose 3 players, it is definitely far more. They'll have far more of an impact, regardless of how important that one player is. That being said, if Perisic and Brozovic are fit to play, and we only miss Nainggolan, I think Barcelona are going to be suffering far more due to the lack of a Messi than we are to missing Nainggolan. And I say this because of Nainggolan's position. While he is, for sure, he has been the most impactful player that we've had in the final third when attacking so far in the season. I don't think we'll be needing so much of him in a match like that where we're playing away at the Camp Nou. I think missing Brozovic, for example, or missing Perisic might be more detrimental to Spalletti's game plan than possibly missing Nainggolan. And maybe I'm just, finding silver linings or whatever, but like the eternal optimist. But to me, I think there's no doubt that Nainggolan is essential when we want to attack, but I don't know how much attack we're going to be wanting to do in the style of the Nainggolan. We would rather have players like a Brozovic who can transition the ball quickly, players like a Perisic who can run down the flank. I think they might prove to be more important than say Nainggolan playing in a trequartista role. Should Nainggolan have been deployed throughout the season next to in a mezzala role next to Brozovic, maybe, but under Spalletti's system, that particular role, I think, if Valero can, a combination of Valero and Politano or Valero and Vecino or Valero and anyone can be made to fill the gap for 90 minutes, I think we should be okay.
Mm. So going into it's Barcelona at the Camp Nou is probably the most difficult away game in Europe right now. Do Inter? I mean, how high do you rate Inter's chances, Richard?
Personally, maybe I'm being a little bit negative, but I'm going to end with a positive line on this as well. I get Mo's point massively, but I think that with Nainggolan, I think what he does give you is that engine, and I think the same goes for Perisic as well. I think they can offer defensive duties, even though their primary role isn't to do that. And so, look, I'm going to be okay. Let's try and be a little bit positive. Inter were never going to go to the Nou Camp and play Barcelona off the field. They were never even going to properly compete. We've not seen Inter play anywhere near the level of football that would be able to do that. However, Barcelona haven't been in the best of form this season. They are missing Messi. There's questions over, Valverde so far. And you can just look at the simple fact that Madrid have been so poor and yet still in catching distance of them. So there is an opportunity. I think if Inter do go there and play as they did in the derby in some respects and absorb that pressure and just think they will get one chance, because Mauro Icardi's proved just needs one.
That's true. That is very much true. Will, what do you think? I mean, how much do you think? I'll ask you the same question that I asked Mo. Do you think it's a bigger problem for Inter to lack Nainggolan than it is for Barcelona to not have Messi?
Well, this question was asked on television last night, actually. And I think in an absolute sense, obviously Messi is a bigger miss, but as Barcelona are the favourites, they can afford to miss a couple of players and still be in pretty good shape. Inter, as the underdogs, as it were, can't really afford to be losing their key players, even though nobody would in their right mind dispute that Nainggolan is on the same level as Messi, because no one is. So it's a blow. I think in that sense, I'm pleased that this is the away game and not the home game, because that's the one that I think we've got a bigger chance of getting something from. James said a couple of weeks ago that the key thing here is, don't let this kind of sort of any kind of defeat sort of trickle into the games that follow. Just give a good account of yourselves. I think anything really is a bonus, even without Messi, because I thought that the key game here was the derby. There's not a huge turnaround time before that match. It's only 72 hours. From what I've heard, Spalletti said yesterday that Perisic and Brozovic probably won't be risked. We have a very important game on Monday as well. So I reckon if there's a doubt, he'll probably choose the conservative route, especially given that we've already got 6 points in this group. I'm interested to see what team he picks, because if all three of those are not available, then he's going to have to concoct some kind of one-off team, because I don't think there's a sort of a natural solution, because you haven't got Gagliardini because he's not eligible in the Champions League. So if Brozovic is not there, you need Vecino and one other. You can't play Nainggolan, obviously, because he's away. You could move Asamoah into midfield, but then if you do that, then you can't play Dalbert at left back because he's not in the Champions League either. You could see one of Keita or Candreva coming in. I don't know. I'm not particularly hopeful about this game, to be honest. I just don't want us to. I want us to give a good account, but I'm not that. I don't think it's a disaster if we don't win the game. I think that the key game is the home game, and then particularly the game of away in London, which will decide our fate in this group. So no, I'm not particularly positive, and but Barca are not infallible by any means. So strange things have happened.
So a prediction then? You think we'll lose?
Yeah, I think we'll lose 2-0.
Cool. Richard, what's your prediction? Do you think Luis Suarez will bite anyone?
I think we could be the first time we ever curse the name Luis Suarez. The very aptly named Suarez. I'm going to go with Will on this. I can see 2-0. I think that's a good prediction.
Mo? Come on, positivity, man. live up to the name. Yeah, live up to that name.
8 straight win. You heard it here first.
Oh, Inter wins. How much?
Yeah, I think you said 8-3.
That's the best prediction ever. Let's just leave it at that. Just keep it at that.
4 for Lautaro and 4 for Icardi.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, I think it's an Inter win. I think I don't know, man. I feel it. I think it's an Inter win.
I think it's so funny. I think it's so funny you mentioned that, because I've got the same little feeling in my stomach that I've got that little tingle as well. That this is the game that I think that can really surprise.
Yeah.
And with Nainggolan out, I really think that I agree with you.
The way Icardi was hugging Lautaro, the way Spalletti went on and almost tackled his players with hugs at the end of the game yesterday. There's something special going on right now. So I think this intangible thing, this feeling, this whatever is gonna be important. But we'll see. You know what I'm gonna do. Sorry. The most important thing for me now is I'm going to put on my Inter jersey and go down to the sports bar and watch the first Inter Champions League game in front of everyone with my Inter jersey for the first time in 7 years. And that's all I care about, really. That's all I care about.
Love it. Yeah. Absolutely love it. No, I'm going to say 1-0 Inter. Candreva scores a 30-yard screamer.
Love it, too.
His first goal in 30 years is what you're going to say.
No. Oh, the candy hate must stop. Right. We will be playing Candy's former team Lazio next Monday, which is why we won't be recording next Monday. We'll be recording on the Tuesday. Just want to briefly touch upon that. Inter will be traveling to Stadio Olimpico to play against the Biancocelesti for the first time since that dramatic win where La Prende Vecino, which has now become Inter folklore.
It's in our intro.
Yeah, exactly. Even that. Personally, I think Lazio will get their revenge. I think I think they will win that game simply because I think Inter. I think it's just one game too much for this Inter squad, and with Brozovic and Perisic looking as exhausted and injured as they are, Nainggolan out. I think that game is a game where I think Lazio will win 2-0. Will, thoughts?
I mean, Lazio are probably one of the most predictable teams in the league because if you look at their season so far, they've played 9 games. They've lost against Juventus, Roma and Napoli, and they've beaten everyone else. So if you use that logic, then we should win. But this is the kind of game that they sort of choke a little bit in. So I think that gives us a bit of hope. I agree that, obviously coming after Barcelona and Milan, this isn't really the ideal time. But I think the fact that we won that game last night gives us a little bit less pressure in the game. We're the away team. We're not obliged to win, although obviously we should be aiming for that. So I think, I'd be fairly satisfied with a draw. That might be a bit sort of pessimistic and small time, but I agree. It's a difficult game. I haven't actually seen much of them this year, but they're very sort of linear in the way that they beat everyone below them and trip up against everyone above them. But if you look at the table, there's a 5-point gap already between Inter and 5th place. So there's a bit of a sort of cushion already. So I don't think a draw is a terrible result. I think it will be 1-1, and I'll say it's Immobile and let's say Candreva, because that would be nice. A goal against his former club.
Yeah, great. Richard, what about you?
Well, I'm confident. Last 2 games in Rome, I've been to both and won both of them. So I'm not there for this one, but I'm still confident that it's a ground that we've got a bit of confidence. And I think if we don't get demolished by Barcelona, we will go there, as Will said, with feeling good about it. So I actually think we'll win that game. I'll just go for a 1-0 and Icardi because it seems to be standard procedure at the moment. But yeah, I'm confident for that on the basis that we don't take a heavy defeat to Barcelona.
Yeah, that is not an insignificant detail. You need to just pass this game.
Mo, any thoughts? Any concluding thoughts on that?
Yeah, strangely, I'm going to be on the pessimistic side, but in the sense that I don't think we're going to lose, but I don't think we're going to win that match. I think all signs are going to point towards Lazio winning, but like Will said, the expectation, the fact that they're home side, the home side, the fact that they are going to be so focused on revenge is going to play against them. So I think maybe we win, but probably it'd be a scoring draw.
I've just realised Candreva scoring the equaliser isn't the best narrative, is it? It's De Vrij scoring the equaliser. After everything that happened last year, he's going to have a fun evening.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Well, as I mentioned, that's all we had time for this week, and we will be next week. We will be back. We will be recording on the Tuesday because the Lazio game is on the Monday. Hoping to have a very special guest on the show for next week. But I would like to thank James Horncastle. I'd like to thank Mr. Richard Hall.
Cheers, guys. Always a pleasure.
Mr. Mo Nassar.
Forza Inter. Cheers, everybody.
And Will Beckman.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you all for joining. And until next week, I'm your host, Nima Tavalli-Ruzzari, wishing you all a good week, 6 points, and Forza Inter.